This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For April 26, 2024, it's the best-sounding podcast in higher ed. This is the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, broadcasting live to tape from coast to coast, easternmost to westernmost, northernmost to southernmost, gate post to hitching post. I'm your local host who can boast the most milquetoast and utmost humility. I'm Chris Decker. It's time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure, and I did just look at the calendar because it is indeed Friday. Sometimes we move things around and I forget.
We did it. We got back on track.
Yes, for several weeks in a row, I think, at this point. All right, well, let's say hello to today's panel of AV SuperFriends. Where's this button here? So today, I'm joined by a dynamic optimization producer, good Lord, from Kansas City, Jamie Reinhardt. That's very dynamic, but optimized. Of some sort. Also joined by a corporate integration manager. That almost sounds real. A corporate integration manager from Corvallis, Oregon, Mark Kolowazinski.
We're going to get more C-suite in here. Trust me.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, we're jamming. We're engineering and getting in there.
Also joined by a central usability associate from Greensboro, North Carolina, Larry Darling.
I'm usable.
Centrally usable.
Only my core.
And finally, we're joined by our regional manager for human paradigms from Bowling Green, Kentucky, Justin Rexing.
Wow, guys. Really appreciate it. 3 words for you. Demoted. I just got demoted.
You've been a vice president for 2 months.
It's a long march to the middle, Justin. Welcome.
I'm just manager.
Get over it, dude.
Regional manager, sir.
Regional,
That's even worse.
Come on.
I got a manager above me.
Assistant to the regional manager.
Wow, what bullshit
Assistant
is that?
vice
That's crazy.
regional manager.
Well, if we make you a vice president every week, there's nowhere to go from there.
Think about how weird the world would be.
I got to figure out some kind of comment to make on that. That'd be difficult, I guess. If
I like to not read them. We just read them
down.
Okay, well, on today's show, we're going to discuss the challenges and opportunities of AV over IP with a very special guest coming up in a few moments. Also, some honest feedback about our little nonsense show here. But first, and you've been waiting for a few weeks, it's time for the news.
Yeah, that's awesome. I need to do another one of those.
No, you don't. So today's article comes from Commercial Integrator, and I've seen this posted around, so it's making the rounds. In fact, I think it went live today or yesterday.
I think it was today.
And is written by 2 friends of the show, Steve Greenblatt and Brittany DiCesare from Control Concepts.
Yeah, we
pointing
know those
out
people.
Yes, we do. Yeah. We've talked to them. So, pointing out that there's a lot of drunk people in the industry who do nothing but drink.
I agree.
And it's starting to raise some questions.
Yeah, it's getting everywhere. It's making it messy.
So what the conceit of what they're bringing up, and like I said, I've seen conversation about this on the socials in recent weeks, that why is every AV industry event a competitive drinking event? There's other things that you can do, and it's not to say that we're teetotalers here, but just like, is this really all we've got? Hey guys, open bar, let's see how disgustingly drunk we can get in the next 2 hours.
We've talked about it even after like Northwest met, but we've talked about it even internally. Is like, it's really exhausting to talk to people who plan their entire event, their entire trip around where the open bar is at what time. Even so far as to say, oh, the happy hour on the floor starts at 3 and this other one starts at 4, so I got to book it across there so that I can get their cold free beer. And it's just like,
people actually do that?
Yes, so many.
No
it's exhausting.
I would say like 10 years ago, first InfoComs I was going to, 15, whatever that was, I was guilty. Like I would actually schedule around parties. I did that.
I didn't.
But I don't anymore, but it sounds like the industry still wants people to do that.
I remember when I was 23, 24, 25 when I first
back when you're partying?
InfoComm, right? So almost college age. Definitely heavy drinker.
Almost.
barely remember the Extron party, the first Infocom. So I've been through all of that. I never really scheduled Infocom around alcohol. I just kind of fell into alcohol. And so I think that is kind of
picture this splash.
I mean, that's kind of what happens. You're like, hey, friends and everybody are like, you want to come along? We're going to this party. And you're like, yeah, sure. What we got to do? Drink tickets. Okay, sounds great. Right. And drink tickets. That's the magic word.
Well, I remember when the social media thing first started ramping up, and
that was fun.
Just respond to this and this. All your about your tickets.
And then then you had to wake up and be in front of Bill Nattrass and learn for 8 hours the next day. And I started learning quick.
Or may not have been hungover in many
that
training
shit
sessions.
Got old, and I realized by drinking, you don't learn anything, and it's hard to function the next day. And it's guess what, Justin, grow up because you're not in college anymore. Stop going to spring break. So it was kind of easy to make that transition. I just think you have to be aware of what your goals are for Infocom. And if it's drinking, do that on spring break in Florida, I guess.
I think one of the things that they brought up in the article was being careful about the impression you're making. And they didn't say the impression you're making through socials, but I think that's a key point. Like back when you all were doing that was what, 15, 20 years ago,
something
like that.
Nobody had pictures of all the stupid shit I did.
No.
Now we are trying to present ourselves to the industry at large through social media. And if that's what they see, because that's what we promote,
then that's what you are.
It reflects on us poorly.
Yeah.
Right.
It may not even be intentional at all. It just so happens that it becomes a numbers game, right? If that's the bulk of what people are seeing, that becomes the narrative, right? And I'll be honest, I've not gone to some of the trade shows over the last couple of years, and I've just witnessed, and sometimes man, there's got to be something else going on. But all I see is pictures of drinks and people in bars, and it's like, well, okay.
So I want a couple of comments on this because it's a thing that it bugs the crap out of me, and not because of the drinking or I'm against that or anything. That's fine if you want to self lubricate to have a drink or two with people. That's part of networking. I get that.
Sure.
But it's not just the big trade shows. It's the little events where the default thing is, hey, we want to host a little event for such and such and such at a bar. Hey, we're going to do this at a bar. Or you go to a conference and the evening event is, oh, we're all going to this bar. Hey, I got an idea. There's other things you can do in this world. And this does not affect me because I am not a non-drinker. I am not, in a program or any sort of thing. But there are people who are. And it's incredibly disrespectful to not have any other option than, well, we're going to a bar. Well, that's great. Also, the interesting person I was talking to an hour ago, and this is that fundamental thing about people who get drunk all the time, don't realize how uninteresting they are when they're incredibly wasted.
Well, that's a whole other, exactly.
No, that's not a whole, that is a huge part of this.
Well,
and
that's a whole other topic is what I was about to say. Okay, that's a big problem.
That pisses me off because I have been out with people where 5 or 6 people, we all go out to dinner or something like that.
And you're a completely different person.
Right. And there's one person there who is drink after drink after drink after drink after drink. And I'm like, this person needs to get themselves into a program. The rest of us have all shifted over to Diet Cokes and 7-Ups 2 hours ago. And there's that one person who's still hammering them down and then, getting increasingly belligerent as the evening goes on. Like, why am I going to go visit with this person next time? And that some of these people are salespeople. This is their job. And I will just say this, as somebody who makes decisions on technology or a lot of technologies that are almost identical, I will choose a lot of things based on my interactions with your salespeople. So it.
I think just sometimes there's that you're out with friends and you do silly things, right? And then there's at business, where's the moderation? And I have appreciated in some of the last few shows that to Mark's point, when we first started going to Infocoms, the party was the thing. That recently some manufacturers have lessened the party or changed it to a way where it's an event that happens to have alcohol and not just the alcohol or whatever. Sure. And I kind of appreciate that. I like the fact that to Chris's point, even though I imbibe, doesn't mean everybody does. And I don't like it that they feel like they shouldn't or can't go because they're, it's uncomfortable. And that's just change the atmosphere a little bit.
But I think people who have been in the industry for a long time and are in the merger and converged everything and all this stuff, I think the business is different. For even people that are going on behalf of a university or whatever else, where 10 years ago it may look like one thing, but now a lot of times it's, oh, you're going to the show? Okay, let's put the business case together. What are you going to learn? What are you going to come back with? What are the things you're going to do? So you're there, you're actually working. So I feel like now it's more as if you are on the clock. So now you kind of have to check yourself. Yeah. What are you doing, right? And so, and some people, maybe that's not the case. Maybe they are there just free running. It's their break and go wild. And that's okay. If that's what you're doing, do it. But for me, kind of as I've kind of transitioned out of that, it is more business focused now.
And I think, Mark, that's a huge thing because the cost of attending one of these has dramatically increased. I mean, if you go to InfoComm for the 3-day training and then stay for the conference and everything else, that's a significant investment that the university is paying, or the enterprise.
Yeah, it's an 8 or 9 day trip. Yeah.
And also if you're, go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
And like, if what they're seeing is this, and you're not coming back with valuable information, and to Chris's point, relationships with other people in the industry who can help you succeed, that's a problem.
You're kind of squandering the opportunity.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Speaking of opportunity, for all you that are listening out there, if you're going to drink at these events and that's all you're doing, I know for myself, that is super stressful for me to think about, with all the crap that I have to do back home and all the stuff that the university needs me to do, and designing AV and businesses that we run and all the things. You're going to just go selfishly leave your family, go to InfoComm, get drunk for a week, forget about all your responsibilities, and then come back and think that everything's going to work out. That's going to be the other thing.
You're right. And it's not a good look. I do want to bring up, there are now entire organizations who seem to exist just on it's spring break all the time, and we're going to do another drinking event. And that's exhausting to me. It's like, guys, why don't you bring up some, why don't you contribute to the industry? Why don't you generate some actual content? Why don't you do, something a little more productive than, hey, we're going to get together and have another drinking contest. The other thing I want to point out is there are people out there who also need to be in a program, and we know who they are, who start pre-gaming at about 10 a.m. and the constant like, oh, I'm going to go find a mimosa. It's like, it's exhausting. I'm here, to Larry's exact point, I'm here to work. This is part of the job. If you do it right, you spend way more time actually working at, your InfoComms or your conferences than you do. It's not a 3-day vacation. You're probably working 12, 15-hour days. And these are the same people right now who are going to be yelling at their car stereos because like, oh, I'm working anyway. It's like, I know who you are. And no, you're drunk, you're loud, you're boorish, and it's not interesting. So kudos to Stephen for Brittany for bringing this up.
I think it's bold, and I think it's a good take.
And it's correct. It is the correct take. Like I said, I've seen this from other people on the socials that this is starting to become a little bit of an issue. I would like the manufacturers who are sponsoring these things to think twice before they default to open bar at our little event thing. Hey, come up with some other idea.
I think the summary here is, and I think what you're about to say, Mark, is I think the summary here is have alcohol at your event. Fine. Sure. That's great. Don't make it the core focus.
Yeah, don't make it the event.
Yeah, that's not the focus, right? The alcohol in that piece is not the focus.
And have other things at the event too. Like I've been to places, because I don't drink. I've been to places where getting a Coke or a Sprite or something else you had to pay for.
You don't drink?
It's just weird.
I don't drink. What about the whole thing that I did at the restaurant?
Yeah, I ended up I wasn't there that night.
You weren't there?
Nope.
Justin, you were so drunk he wasn't even there. So.
Yeah.
No, I thought Larry was there at that.
Well, now that we're a bunch of old people, get off my lawn.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna take a quick break here. Come back, and we're gonna be joined very special guest to solve all of our AV over IP issues. So hold on, let me push this one. Nope, this one. It's this one.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right. So we were talking the other day about AV over IP, and we thought we don't have all the answers of AV over IP. So we're going to go find someone who does. And then we're going to definitively solve all AV over IP issues in the next 30 minutes. So
today,
get out, stop, everyone driving right now, stop driving. Get your notebook out. Write this down. This is important.
We're going to distill the whole conversation into 30 minutes.
And of course, because we're a bunch of morons, we thought we would go find someone who knows what they're talking about. And Justin said, I know the perfect person. So we are joined right now by Jose Mozota. He's the president of Fremen Solutions, and he's here to set us straight. You probably know him from, well, you were with Legrand for a while. You've done so many Avixa courses. Jose, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself for people who don't know you, and we're going to then jump right into the weeds with AV over IP and everything about that.
Sure. Glad to be here today. So I come from the networking structured cabling world. I worked for Ortronics for many, many years. And at the time, 2005 has started when we were installing 10 gig networks. So when all these suppliers of 1 gig networks actually say that 10 gig networks don't work, we know that it's not true. Then I jump into the Legrand side of AB, Middle Atlantic, C2G. And after that, I retired. And I created my company, Fremen Solutions, and I create and deliver content. And right now, I'm a big contract trainer, so I teach essentially networking technology and a new class that we created, AV for IT people, because we try to train the AV people on networking, but we don't train the IT people on AV. And then when they sit at the table, the IT guys have no idea what we're talking about. So we hope that class is going to help us solve that issue. And by the way, I have no answers regarding AV over IP. Actually, I called Justin because I needed answers.
No.
Oh my God.
Boy, this backfire. Yeah,
Let's get to that nightmare later.
Right.
I want to ask about this class.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm curious about that too.
What have you seen? Because from the AV side, we gripe and moan and bemoan the fact that IT or network guys won't let us do what we want. What's the other side? What are their challenges when they talk to us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, their challenges is that they have no idea what we're doing.
We don't either, though, Jose.
Don't tell them, Justin.
We don't know what the hell's going
We're all
on.
just making it up.
So now that's the first time anybody's admitted that. Most of the time it's like, oh, I know what you're doing. No.
Yeah. Oh, Jose's a straight shooter, man.
No, I mean, the IT people, let's face it, they're running their networks, okay? They're used to having totally interoperable systems, no matter what they bring in. As long as the cabling was installed correctly, the network is going to work. And the OSI model is beautiful, you know? And then they're running networks, typically trying not to use more than 50% of the bandwidth, even when they have peaks. And they have all these little packets of emails and files and this and that going around, and they just have to worry about cybersecurity. The rest of the traffic on the network tends to be pretty simple, okay? And then suddenly, here we come, and what we do in this class, AV4IT, is the first thing we do is we created a module to explain what is an AV payload. You know, so we show them that the audio is very small bandwidth, so that's why that was the first thing we put on the network. About that, the video, it's forget about it. I mean, it's gigabytes, no matter
we
what.
love 50% of our pipes, and we're like, here's 90. Yeah. Boom. Do it.
Yeah. It goes from this cute little conversation about email to all of a sudden a gorilla kicks the door down, and I want all the bandwidth for everything.
Yeah. So then
they're like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah. And then the
where did he come
is,
from?
What are you going to do? Okay. So then we tell them, well, fortunately, we have compression. Okay. So then we tell them you have compression codecs, and that is the first big decision that any AV over IP person is going to have to make when they're going to set up a system, because that's going to be the triangle of quality image, bandwidth, latency, and the big dollar sign in the middle. So we tell them we compress the signal. Then after we compress the signal, we're going to put it into your network. Now we're going to use transport protocols that you have absolutely no idea about. Okay, our transfer protocols are going to run on UDP, And then they go, what? UDP? What do you mean? That's connectionless. I mean, that's impossible. You're going to be dropping packets, whatever. And then we tell them, well, at layer 6, we're going to put little things in there to try and fix it if possible. RTP, sending messages, making sure that everything works. And so we're dealing with transfer protocols that they have no idea. Mm-hmm. And we're flooding their networks with very high bandwidth. For example, if you're using JPEG 2000, So that kind of conversation. And then we get to cybersecurity, and we have to tell them it's not that we don't care about cybersecurity.
but we don't. We really don't.
It's not that we don't care. It's just that we don't really care. Yeah.
We don't really think about it, so therefore we can't care.
Yeah, but sure. But even when we want to care, it's hard to care because AV is different. I mean, we don't have agents. The product that we use don't lend itself to agents that they can be querying continuously with their SIM tools to make sure that you belong, that you don't belong, etc. And then our AV systems don't like to be queried constantly because that interferes with our transport. Mm-hmm. And then we use ports that they have never heard of. So they are closed on the firewall. And we have to go out, find out what they are, and try to talk to them to open them at 2:30 p.m. on Friday because we need to do a firmware update. So there's so many things that they are not aware of that come together with having an AV payload on a network. That's what we're trying to teach them in a 12-hour class.
We struggle a lot.
And then it turns into the credential conversation right away. Who are you and why are you even talking about these things? Because where's your Cisco credential? Because you're not allowed to use that language without that credential.
All these...
I took the CCNA exam with
you. Me too. I failed multiple times.
I'll tell you right now.
I found that a lot of times there's this assumption that because they're networking professionals of whatever area that they know exactly what we're talking about when we say, well, we need the P2P clocks or multicasting, or can you help us with this? And it's shocking to me when there's this struggle. And one of the things we talk about a lot here is like, why don't they know these things? And how come we're trying to use them?
And it comes down to they just never had to.
Exactly.
That's all it is. It's experience. Because
they
what
never
they deal with is
where
what Jose
would
was
they?
talking about, general traffic and security.
Where would they have dealt with these? Unless they came from like some knock center where they were dealing with a lot of H233 or whatever in the past, or like some call center, they probably would have never dealt with much of this stuff and payload and all that stuff. So I think that was like the perfect segue, because that is exactly where everybody's at. You have described every conversation that everybody who works in higher education or anywhere in AV, or any situation where they're using AV in an enterprise environment, because this is the day-to-day conversation I think we all have to touch on somewhere.
They know what they know, and they have no idea about what they don't know. See, when I started teaching my class and I wanted to learn more about why would you be LAN instead of subnet, what's the difference, etc., I started calling people that I work with on electronics. These are network people. And it was clear. If I call a guy that did routing, he only knew about routers. If I called a guy that did access control, he only knew about that. They specialize very quickly. PTP, Justin, I mean, that's a 4-letter word for them. They never done PTP in their life. And multicasting, yes, we love multicasting, all the idea of one-to-many. But they never had to do multicasting. They do unicast or they do broadcast, and the hell with it. So they never had the experience. So it is very, very difficult for them to help the IB people. And even DHCP with reservations. What do you mean DHCP with reservations? So it's hard. It's a very hard conversation, but we need to start somewhere. And I think that AV has done a great job of trying to learn enough about networking. But I don't think that we have never lended a hand to them to help them learn about.
Yeah, how do we? Last question on that, but from me at least, before we have you start asking us the questions. How do we get through some of these roadblocks and barriers and recognize there might be a knowledge gap, we'll say, without saying there's a knowledge gap, because nobody likes to have it pointed out that they may not have all the answers. I mean, how do we approach that? The people coming to your class, number one, have already recognized that this is something they need to talk about. But the people that haven't come to your class, how do we start breaking down or getting through some of the bricks in that wall?
That's, I think, a difficult one because we are promoting this from the Avixa side, and Avixa doesn't have a lot of exposure to the IT world. And you can see, you go to Infocom, for example, and you may find Netgear there, and Arista has a booth this year. Cisco doesn't even show his face there. They couldn't care less. Okay. So essentially, it's very hard to even tell them that they have that need and that we can help them with some of the answers to fill them into an AV knowledge. And so it's very hard. And I tell you the truth, I don't really know how to do it.
It's delicate, but I think you're taking a good approach because you're not starting at product. You're starting at concepts. You're starting at like the stuff that makes it work in that common glossary and that base, right? I think a lot of people jump in and say, just tell me what to go buy and I'll just go get the stuff, right? And that's not the journey, right? And I think building that foundation and understanding what you can and can't do is really important. Because it will build that kind of shared lexicon for people to actually be able to communicate with their IT professionals and vice versa. And it is a lot of friction at times. And I think that's where I think I'd love to dive in here a little bit and start talking about, as you look at the road of AV over IP in front of us, it's not just a straight path. It's got lots of twists and turns. And arguably, we're trying to do a lot of the same stuff, but each of us have different scenarios that we have to work within for whatever maturity of our organization, our enterprise network, or wherever it is, our security stance and posturing, all those things will kind of guide how we can and cannot choose product and how that is deployed in our network. Does that feel like a fair spot to kind of start to pivot and jump in here? Okay.
Sure.
I think quickly, if people who have listened to us, we probably recognize where we are with our networks. I'm going to challenge us to quickly go around here and describe kind of the network environment that we really have. I'll tell you where I'm at. My goal is kind of flatten everything out, get everything on the network, have everything routable the same, no private islands, nothing like that, because I'm trying to have a completely transparent network with all my endpoints so I can start rolling up and do large scale reporting. And it's not so I can move and overflow and do all that stuff. That's not what it is. It's about transparency of data. Yeah. So, and being ready because we have a larger mission in front of us about rolling up and being cloud ready and native. And so I'm trying to get everything aligned for that way. Not there completely across the board, but I want to have everything be on real IP space. Larry, I want to throw it to you. Can you give an example kind of what your network looks like?
Yeah, I'm on the opposite of that spectrum. We used to have every classroom on our campus with a managed switch in it. The system itself, the NC system, got audited. Zero Trust came in and said that distributed IT model has to go. So our managed switches got taken out of the room, but our old buildings across campus only had 3 network drops to each room. In order for me to get network drops to these old classrooms, the price tag was astronomical. So I've got two limiting factors to me. I have the price of getting infrastructure where I need it in old buildings that are built out of asbestos, and I have the fact I can't have a distributed switch model anymore. And so because of that, I'm on private island world where I can have a AV VLAN dropped to the classroom itself, but I get one of those and I can't have a managed from the IT group on that. So I would like to get everything on the network. I would like to have AV over IP, central kit of parts, as Mark likes to say, just rolling out and have that everywhere. But there's a cost limitation in doing that in a standard classroom at this point. For active learning spaces, sure, it still makes all the sense in the world, and we have those on campus, but for the most part, our network enterprise just doesn't support that.
I would say I would welcome Jamie or Chris to give a quick example. Jamie, I think you represent like a Goldilocks situation. I'm not sure if we're completely there yet, but Chris, is your a bit of a blend between Larry and ourselves here?
Yeah, I mean, we have a dedicated AV VLAN with routable addresses across campus, across which we can send traffic. What we run into is that traffic does not always play nice with the campus network. And I will say on the outset, I know there's this high-level model of we want a flat network so we can send traffic. Oh, I think at least the five of us on the call would say we don't care about that. That's not even on our radar. We have no interest in doing that. And yet that seems to be kind of like an end goal for a lot of, I would say from the manufacturer standpoint, but maybe just this general concept of AV over IP is like, it'll just go everywhere. No, I don't want it to go everywhere. I want to keep it in the room. So it doesn't matter to me. So despite the fact I have routable campus addresses for things, I do have a managed switch in each room. And as I like to say, I have more managed switches than the networking team, which makes them mad, but it's the truth. And so I'm responsible, arguably, for more network than they are to some extent. But and at times I have cheated and put things on 192 mode because I know it's going to work and it's not going to cause problems. But that's clearly not a place we want to be for long-term, ultimate, ideal solutions. But it works for today, so there it is.
Justin, how's your network feel?
We're in a weird space, y'all.
Just so,
do you rent your network from someone?
Maybe. I think
this will be real.
I think
quick.
I know a guy I need to talk to about networking.
No. So
WKU just took their network out.
Before AV over IP was really a thing a long time ago, we were starting to use Cisco firewalls for all of our systems, just mainly for security. And that kind of perpetuated along all of our systems. So we have all these Cisco ASA 5505s out there that are antiquated and old, and they're in front of like MPS 100 systems,
crazy,
all kinds of stuff. So here we are today. We are still pseudo deploying. We're trying to figure out what this new firewall appliance is, because kind of what y'all are having problems with too. They don't want a managed switch. They don't want AV people extending their network. It gets things out of control. That's basically the problem. And by having an appliance there,
that's the fear.
That's the fear.
It's a fair point to bring it up, because we are not networking people. And if I drop a switch on that does other stuff, but it's on their network, now I've got extensions of the network. Yes, it can be a problem.
It could be a big problem for them if like we screw something up. It could blow up a whole building theoretically.
It's
blow it up.
What are you doing?
It's really not as big of a deal as they make it, because I've done it a few times.
Yeah. The government's now scrubbing our episodes. So we now have these AV over IP solutions out there. We're kind of in this weird monitored situation. We're not sending traffic anywhere, but we're exploring, do we put a firewall in front of the AV over IP switch so we can at least manage all the devices behind it, but still isolate all that traffic that needs to stay isolated? We haven't deployed that exact scenario yet, but I think that might be where we're going. So right now, we're just throwing islands out there. We're like, hey, we'll get back to you later, and we'll build that bridge to connect that island at some point down the road. But we gotta get more resources.
You have a bunch of 192 floating around out there.
Yeah, and we're gonna bring those 192s back home
out in the water.
Some rafts and some.
You keep telling yourself
throw some buoys out there.
Sure.
Yeah,
and then Jamie, I think you represent a unique situation, because you've been able to do a lot. You've been able to move things and get things on your network pretty readily. So
yes, I have. And it's kind of where most of us say we want to go. And I'm fighting these battles every day of, everybody wants all of it on the network and available. First off, I agree with everybody. I want all of my stuff on the enterprise network, and I don't give two flips to get everything everywhere. That is not why I'm doing it. Mark, it's more similar to what you were talking about. Was I want to be able to access,
not the traffic.
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
And when that day comes that I find the proper tool to be able to, collate all of this information into one dashboard that will never exist because, but when we first kind of started putting network things on the network, we had this battle early on, and this is 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, right? Even just control. Do we just keep it locally and do RS-232 and there's one connection to your controller and be done with it? Or do we purposely go through and start putting things on the enterprise? And when we talked to our networking crew, they said, sure, we'll spin you up. How many, and, it's how many do you need? Well, today, 2. Eventually 200. Well, we'll just give you a subnetted VLAN, so 250, how many ever, addresses in each building. And then they're on the enterprise. You can reach in and reach out, do whatever you need to do. But this way, at least, you have your building set up. I tiptoed into actually putting AV over IP on the enterprise. I only started really doing that a few years ago, where most of you had gotten into it before I had. But I purposely was evaluating products and trying to find products that I could put directly on the enterprise network upon the VLANs that I already had created, and I worked with the networking, and it's been fine. I have devices that are, a little bit lower bandwidth, that are just easy to put on, and they're fine. And then some of the more challenging codecs, the JPEG 2000s, that are a little bit, the jumbo frames become an issue, and some clocking for, I have Dante on. The only thing I don't really put on the enterprise massively is AVB for biamp stuff. That said, I still have my networking crew setting up the Cisco switches in order to be, so that can still be managed from the back end, even though that traffic doesn't hit the enterprise.
So when you say enterprise, are you talking about the no joke, the backplane of the enterprise? Okay, yeah. So I think that I want to make sure we're clear about that.
I'm lucky. I have. But we have a very healthy networking crew across our campus. The backplane is enormous, and
I think we are almost there. But I still provide, like Chris, my own managed switch where we can. We provide that there because we want to have guaranteed bandwidth, and it is enterprise routable IP space. However, it's localized to the room itself. So I'm not going back to an idea.
I have a mixture in most of my classrooms, and I do have a few buildings. To Larry's point, they're turning into zero trust, and having managed switches out in the podiums has become a problem. But we have such a healthy backplane that I can put them on. No joke, put it on an MDF, run it through this core system switches, it's siphon. And my management or my network management crew have been awesome to work with. When we find problems, when I have a P2P clock that is accidentally making it into the next building over and screwing up, connection statuses, they spent days helping me isolate that and say, oh, look here, this was maybe to Jose's point, well, we never deal with this before, but I found the theory, and here it is, right? But they're so interesting, and this is their nerdiness. This is what they love to do. Even when they go home, they play with network. That he was going home at night and dorking around with his own to find that particular deal, right? And it's been great. Now, I am starting to get to a point where there's some questions about how we manage all of that. But I still continue. If I can, going forward, I will plug it into the wall first, set it up, and go. I don't come back to islands I have islands. I'm not lying to you. I have islands, but not. Yeah, not very many of them.
Somewhere.
Not very many of them.
No. So Jose, does that sound like the typical classmates you have in your class? They're going to be somewhere along this spectrum of network and or deployment. Does that seem about right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I get people from all different levels of expertise, but the questions that they typically ask, because when we talk about networking technology, it's like very basic introduction. It's like I tell them, I'm putting tidbits of information in your mind, and if one of them resonates with something that you're doing, then go and find more about it. Okay, but definitely when it comes to VLANs, everybody wants to ask questions about VLANs. When it comes to switches, everybody wants to understand better when it comes to switches. It's really interesting that we say that we can go anywhere, anytime, but they are very clear that streaming is a very specific case, and that 95% of AV over IP, it's on the LAN. And I tell them, if you need streaming, buy a streaming solution from somebody. You cannot worry about it. Okay, right. So they ask about that. Then we get to, in layer 1, they're very interested about the cabling, which is good. And it's something that they touch. I think that layer 1, layer 2, and IP addressing are things that they touch. So net masking, they're very high on that because it's a way to find out that two devices cannot talk to each other because somebody put the wrong static IP address on them.
I've never done that.
Those things. Now, when I start talking about transfer protocols, they start drawing a blank, okay? Yeah. But I tell them, listen, the thing is that when you buy a solution from a manufacturer, they can use one of these different transfer protocols. And unless you understand what every transfer protocol can do for you, then how are you going to buy the solution? You know, they're just going to sell you some marketing hoopla, and then you're going to buy something that you don't need. So understanding that if you do 2110 or IPMX now, and you have the ability then to have the essence streams and all that, it's important. Understanding they say RTP is too old. Well, Zoom is using RTP. Come on, guys. Doesn't matter if it's old. It works perfectly. So that's, I start getting a little bit more of traction on that. And I don't get a lot of questions, to tell you the truth, when I get to the security section. And I'm really glad to hear Zero Trust all over the place here, because that's something that I promote to there. But essentially, yes, all these things are the things that keep people worried about.
Yep. And I think the traditional AV kind of career arc will naturally align with like layer 1, 2, and 3. Right. Yeah. Everybody is going to be really comfortable with those things. But as soon as you go up above that, that's where things are going to get shaky. Right. And so, and I think that's pretty typical for most AV people that are kind of entry level or even slightly beyond that. It kind of, it gets a little bit weird because it quickly changes from like spigots and tubes. And it's no longer functioning that way, right? And so now it totally changes everything. So in that regard, I kind of want to say, take our examples we've kind of given to the network, and I want to start looking at, so what does that now mean, right? So how does that change our perspectives of what we shouldn't do, can and cannot do when we start looking at the kind of all the stuff that's on the market? And I want to start with kind of in island mode, because I think it's probably the one that's probably most readily available, and some would probably say the quickest to deploy when it comes to AV over IP. And so, Larry, can you kind of share an example of kind of island mode and kind of what that means when we say that?
Sure. Well, I have done the island modes where you don't have to have a central brain. And so I've done everything from really small systems where I have 2 transmitters, 2 receivers, and I'm just sending commands to route those. This was for a portable unit that ended up going to Africa to teach a mobile class out there. That every time the processor got hooked up and connected, it made those routes and got the class up and going. And then I've done large active learning spaces, same thing. And to me, like, the active learning spaces is where it first clicked to me about how flexible it was, how much money I was saving, how simple it made the install. And so that's like where I'm at. Like, I agree with what everybody else says. I don't need to get that traffic anywhere outside of that room at any point. But for those complex environments where it used to be a 32 by 32 matrix, all of a sudden, like, this gives me flexibility and ease of use, and it just made sense. Unfortunately, nobody wants to play that game anymore. At least most of the manufacturers that and this is my big struggling block right now, is most of the manufacturers want to talk that enterprise level. And even though there is still a use case for this private island, nobody really wants to acknowledge that that's where most people are playing. And I think that most people aren't in the Mark or Jamie camp. A lot of enterprises are still, okay, we'll give you a couple of jacks to this room and you make it work in there.
And so, I want to tease out a little bit more of that, Larry, because I think when you look at the AV over IP solutions, you'll kind of know you're seeing this when you see a lot of products that have some, I'm going to call it some middleware engine / widget in between, where it handles a lot of that addressing for you. It's going to act as a traffic controller, and by default, it will kind of use language like easy deploy, quick, easy spins up your network, and they land really fast. And they can drop on an island network. They may align with some prefabricated profiles that exist on many switch manufacturers now that are out there. Choose this one and you're off and you're done. And it will work, right? The light switch will turn the light on and it does all the things. However, oftentimes the only thing you really can communicate with may be that middleware third-party thing. And in between, you're not actually communicating directly to the endpoints necessarily. The traffic's kind of routed on its own island network. So I'm saying like 192, 169, something along those lines. It's not really part of your enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. And so you end up with still having to put boots on the ground to go service that system, because I can't get every port or every device on my network. So it doesn't give me the flexibility I really need. At that point, it might as well just be an HTTP-based.
Right, but at a certain point, it does become cost effective, right? It's quick, it's easy to do. You can go out and do those things. I think, and for many folks, it may be their first foray into AV over IP in some realm, because it is affordable. There's a lot of options in the market that look like that.
There's a lot of companies that do it that way. Not recommending, just knowing. Liberty does it. Extron does it. Crestron sells a thing, but they don't need it. But and so it's that intermediary box that just kind of.
Jamie, that's not true. It makes every AV over IP system worse when you use that one. So.
Well, I'm just saying, without specifically trying to think of it as being a recommendation, but these devices are out there, and sometimes they are that baby's first step, or it's the final solution. Then it makes sense.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the same box, whether it's 5 devices, 50 devices, 100 devices, and they expect you to have that in your server room or your central closet, and that controls the entire building.
And I think there was a bit of market reaction in that too, is that you saw manufacturers who recognize, well, maybe these AV folks are only knowledgeable up to layer 1, 2, and 3. And so how do we quickly do that? And so they effectively just put a wrapper around it and said, well, we're going to deal with all the IP stuff for you. And we'll do all the subscription and all that, everything to transport, and we'll take care of all that. And it's a nice, easy button to have success. And for integrators, it certainly makes a lot of checks come in the mail. It's really fast to get stuff out there. Justin, have you deployed some of these?
Maybe.
One or two.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So some manufacturers require it, some don't. And I think, Jose, that's kind of what you were asking me is we had a phone conversation. You said, what manufacturer is the best? Well, obviously you didn't really ask that, but that's kind of where we're getting at is it depends, right? And this is, it depends on the variables. It depends on the network. So what are some of the specific questions some of your students are asking you in regards to that subject?
Well, obviously, one of them that we may not want to go about is essentially pricing. I mean, the question that time was very, very clear. What is a product that is a medium price point? I don't want to pay the highest possible. I understand that the cheapest, when you go really cheap, something is going to be missing. So I want to know a middle of the road price point that will give me a product that is reliable. And it doesn't necessarily have a lot of bells and whistles.
Sure.
And if I have a problem, I can call somebody.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So that's essentially what they were going after.
Okay.
And I think what we found is that a lot of these manufacturers are similarly priced, and they all have 3 to 4 variations of AV over IP that scale in pricing as well. So depending on the bandwidth needs, do you really need to have 4K? Do you really need to have uncompressed video? Those variables are going to dictate price, of course.
Yeah.
So the needs dictate all of that.
So you kind of bring up a good point there, Justin, is that in a long lost show, we did a kind of an episode on that assessment model for AV over IP endpoints. And I actually brought that document up here because I think it teases towards what you're saying is everybody wants to just know that quick price. I'll give you a couple options for where I like to hold rules of thumb here. I can get high quality endpoints for about $500 per endpoint.
Yes.
You can do that, right? And it will be reliable. It'll give you all the things you need to do. If I need something higher quality, higher resolution, $1,000 becomes that next step is where I'm going to kind of go, right? And it kind of scales that way. And I'll kind of stop the math exercise right there, where I can quickly build a system really fast with $500 or $1,000 per endpoint, count your ins, count your outs, add your sinks, add your sources, put a switch in between. Right? Like that's really the rough-to-mit here on how we can kind of get there.
I think that's accurate. Whether or not you include, because if you include some of the less expensive options and they have one of these middle management devices, you have to include that in the price of per unit, right? And that's where
which is also about the same price as an endpoint.
And I look at it too, like I want that you have all the bells and whistles, but what's the one that gives me 80% of that? And that needs to be under $1,000. Right.
Yep.
And then another caveat to this is, does your encoder, or do you need a 2x1 switch right there at the encoder, which, the lower quality encoders are going to be more expensive at that point. So some manufacturers have built in 2x1 or 2x2 switches. So that could be advantageous.
But I think that
depends. If you're a purist, it's one endpoint per thing.
Right. Yeah, it limits you.
It does. It can. Yeah.
So I'm going to quickly rattle off, just for history's sake here, again, the assessment sheet I made. And this was like coming out of pandemic. I think we did this. So
is this on our website?
I don't know. We'll share. I'll put it out there somehow. And I made a really quick spreadsheet because we were doing tests, and I said, well, how can I create criteria to actually put some scoring together around endpoints and these ecosystems that were being shipped here, so we can kind of come away with an actual number as our assessment. And so I'm not saying this is definitive. This was our culture's needs at the time, and I think it'll resonate with some folks. And I kind of had the needs to have segment and then the nice to have stuff. And to me, the need to have, and I'll kind of go through, and it scored 1 being lowest, 10 being highest based on this scale. So easy to control via third-party hardware, meaning it has to be compatible with the trons and or open things that are doing control in my environment. Pretty standard, right? Nothing weird. My next one is the autonomous endpoints. That's what I really wanted to have a solution that did not require a middleware device to control traffic. I could control it by the third party if need be. Mixed success with different variants that kind of ship with that. One thing that was really important to me, I wanted to find sub $1,000. So if it was under, you can kind of score it the way it was. I needed to be 1 gig only.
Yes.
So I couldn't afford 10 gig uplink, right? So I needed that. I assessed by that. I wanted everything to be PoE powered. Don't like wall warts. Hate having to manage that, right? Low experience latency. This one's kind of nebulous, but I didn't want to have move the mouse and then 10 seconds later we have the mouse move. So it's got to be pretty close to real time. Small form factor. I couldn't have things that are full rack mount things. Not to saying there aren't good ones out there, Jimmy. You could probably wedge something back there.
But that drives me bonkers. Look at this AV over IP thing. It's a half U and it's 20 inches deep. I'm like, what are you thinking?
Right. Exactly. Right. And then I had some shipping constraints in there, but I'll take that off. And then my nice to have, because I think the nice to have really starts to get into the differentiators here. Nice to have Dante or AES 67 native audio.
So that would be a must-have for me.
And I think that's quickly moving up into the must-have for me as well.
Really?
So,
Jamie thought that was funny.
Mark wants, he has to have it for his analog ceiling mic.
For his analog microphones.
You need it, right? And so, and then I got the color sampling, right? As close as we can get to 444, though I haven't really seen that outside of the 10 gig range. Cleanly,
right? And I want to say something about that. That does not matter.
It does
anywhere.
not matter.
So
it does in art spaces.
Good enough.
Right now, there's somebody yelling at their car stereo about that. No one. It's like sending AV over IP across campus. No one cares.
Yep.
Yeah. Because we're in a room where the projector displays are already washed out. It's already blown out. So everyone likes to tout 444. Don't care.
So maybe I'll couch that and say I like to have an option in the product line that's compatible that has that. Right? Yeah, but you don't care.
I would like to have that gun available when I need it.
What is it with you at guns and bombs and what is going on over there?
I'm telling you, I'm trying to get the government to skim.
I guess so.
Okay. Hey, but Chris, you made a very nice point when you mentioned that 444. One of the things that I have a lot of fun when I give my classes is telling people, do you watch television? Are you happy with television? Do you watch Netflix? Are you happy with Netflix? Then can you please stop talking about high bandwidth signal to get good quality picture?
Yep.
I mean, somebody mentioned I don't need 10 gig. Well, besides medical imaging, who needs SDVoE? And then you read a document in the web that says SDVoE is the new standard.
It's the new standard, yes.
I mean,
No, it's not.
give me a break. You know what I call them very nicely? I call them the vampires of the OSI model, because they sit at the API layer and they suck the blood of the model, just giving you a beautiful API and trying to convince you that that's the best thing that you can do in your life. And I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of a 10 gig network if I have the money, but not because of SDVoE. No, because I want to be able to put a hell of a lot of streams in there. Yeah. And if I need JPEG 2000, and by the way, somebody can tell me why they need JPEG 2000 versus 265 or AV1 or BC2, then I want to have my network be capable to do that, and maybe an 100 gig link between the two switches. That's the other one that was difficult, that they always ask questions. How do I calculate switch off links? How do I calculate
your inputs and outputs? Depends where you're landing your ins and your outs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of that, it really came into like the loop out was really, I do like units with loop outs.
Agreed.
As weird as that is,
helpful.
That's just a utility thing. That's a great thing to have. Yeah.
You have HDMI loop out, and also audio, flexible audio, analog I/O that can be rerouted, turned into a loop out and or an in.
You're talking about embedding, de-embedding, depending on the
embed, de-embedding. It becomes a little bit of a Swiss Army knife when you need it.
That's that other gun in the other suitcase.
Stop it with the gun.
That's
the nice to have thing, right?
That's what he was talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was kind of it. That was how I set out down this journey to start looking at things, and it gave us the ability to come away with a number, right? So this was and here's 7. Why it scored. So and
scoring criteria.
We'll drop that either in text form or some version of that. You can take and copy that out there, but it gives you a fair lens to kind of go out there. And your organization may be different; it may value those and weight those differently.
One variable, unfortunately, and I really don't want to spend much time talking about this variable, is that some people might just pick a certain manufacturer because they already buy that same manufacturer and control and the hardware, and they're just going to dive in. Be very careful when you do that and understand and know what you're buying, because again, these manufacturers make 3 or 4 different flavors of this crap. And if you buy one that you don't like, guess what? You're going to have to eat it for a while, and it's not going to taste very good.
I was going to bring up similar, is that also be careful that the ones that have the good, better, best, they're not always interoperable. Mm-hmm. So if you buy just the good one, its codec doesn't go to the best one, so you can't just hop swap between them, because it's a different codec and a different protocol. And so you need to be very conscientious when you go to buy, and you think, well, they have these 3 tiers and I can hit it. My high-end ones get the high-end one and my low-end one gets the low-end one. And then you have one die and you put in the low-end one on the high-end one because it's an emergency. It doesn't always work. So pay very close attention to the tiers within that one manufacturer, because it's not always equal and they don't always play nice.
Right, and your compression's changed. I glossed over one, and I think it's really important that you actually mentioned it, Jamie. And I didn't actually explicitly call it out. I only needed 1080p capable devices.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
I made a note. Are they 4K ready? Is there something in the series? But understanding that does play into your bandwidth. But I do not, still to this day, am not transporting around 4K.
I have exactly one.
IP.
No.
I'm doing 2 or 3, but it's that 1 gig low bandwidth stuff.
I've got exactly one, and it's a special use thing, right? Everybody has the one, but I'm the same.
Yeah.
I usually like to, again, to Mark's point, I like to make that as part of my would likes and then dial it back. Because then I know I can go balls to the wall with my bandwidth if I need to, but chances are it's going to come in under. And like Jose said, 10 gigs, wonderful. Because now you can put 5 of these things down the same pipe instead of just one.
Yep.
Now, one question for you guys. I mean, the codec side is fairly, not simple, but fairly straightforward to teach people about quality of image, latency, bandwidth, you make a choice, etc. When it comes to transfer protocols, if you have to buy a solution and suddenly, some manufacturer is using RTP Suddenly, if somebody comes and says, well, you could use NDI. Somebody says, well, I'm implementing SMPTE 2110, not only for production and broadcast, but on devices that you can use on your network. And then you don't need to embed the embed. Or why don't you use IPMX now that they are building gateways to connect to HDBaseT and to other systems? How you, as guys that are running actual networks, make a decision on which protocol would you prefer to use?
I only use interoperable protocols.
That's BS. I don't think there is that situation. Yeah.
That's what the loop out is for, right, Mark? You loop out to a different box. You've got
unfortunately, none of them are interoperable. That's what sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you take NDI, they're not always interoperable, and I treat them as disposable. That's why I don't want the brains. I don't want the intermediate box, because at some point so tomorrow I can just go to the endpoint, take out one black box, put it in the next black box. Now they're all interoperable.
Yeah. Yep. I'm kind of the same way with Jamie. I don't necessarily shop for AV over IP based upon protocol. Now, there's other things that we just went through that we shop based upon, but I'm not necessarily going, ooh, should I do JPEG 2000 or something different? Now, I do prefer, Dante over AES67, for example. The audio side's a little bit more clear in my head when I'm shopping for protocols. The video side is actually more aligned with Mark's worksheet here. And if the feature set is correct and the manufacturer has all those options, I will probably jump into that manufacturer pool, hoping they don't screw me later on and pull a product or change the product and do something really stupid.
You jump in and it's only you in there. Like, where the hell is everybody?
So you kind of almost have to, like, if you're deploying a lot of this stuff, just like with your control systems, you almost have to buy into a brand. You want to sample a lot of brands first, but you kind of sometimes do, even though you don't want to.
To be honest, I am hoping 2110 wins somewhere.
It'd be great.
I think all of us
I hope. It'd be great, right? And I've heard a lot of rumblings and mumblings that is the case. I don't think we live in that world yet. I think it'll be the next generation of endpoints that actually get us there. It will not be the current generation that's going to get there.
What about IPMX? I mean, IPMX runs on 2110. It's AES67, and it adds all the other things. So do you guys think that IPMX will have a chance to be the standard?
I think the problem is, and we talked about this on a couple of our shows recently, is the motivational factor there for manufacturers to adopt this stuff, because all of the Trons and all of these other people that are developing all these AV over IP have their own solution and they don't want to work with anybody else. Mm-hmm. So who's going to be that first to risk it all and jump off that plank and say,
Blackmagic,
I'm diving into IPMX. Blackmagic did it.
Blackmagic did it.
That's broadcast.
That's how it starts.
But we need some more adoption there. And then once one or two people go, everybody starts going.
We keep screaming at displays and camera makers and saying if display makers and camera makers would just pick it and say, there's a network port on our display, and it only takes SMPTE or
just plug in. You don't need a decoder.
Plug it right in. Now the camera and display. We've told Sony, we've told Panasonic, we've told all of the big ones that make both ends. Like, if you guys would just come out and say,
they're all working
this is what we're doing, the middlemen are going to go, well, shit.
But they don't know what to do, because guess what? Dante came out with AV over IP for video, right? Well, damn it, there's 3 versions. So which version goes on that projector? Which version goes on that camera? Which version goes on that TV? Do we put SDVOE on our camera? Well, if we do, then nobody's going to buy it. So all these things that engineers have to think about when they're developing product, I feel that they're in a hard spot right now.
I feel like most people are like envisioning this dream scenario. Right. I think there's a lot of homework needs to be done before, even if a standard came out tomorrow. most people are probably not plumbed, and their layer one's probably not even ready to get there, right? So I think incrementally you have to holistically kind of roll out and get everything correct from your layer one, layer two, layer three, get all that stuff in order, get all your house in order, so that when that standard does reveal itself, you can finally say, you know what, aha, it's here. My next generation of upgrades, I can make that, and I'm going to be interoperable for what it's going to be. But I think people are looking at like, hey, I have this HDMI switcher, I want to replace it with some interoperable standard thing. I hate to tell you, it's just not out there yet. Architect all your other layers and get it ready so that when it does come out, you're ready for it. And you're going to probably have something in between.
Disposable.
Yeah, but I think the key is what you do with this podcast and what many people are trying to do, it's education. What you said before about it's not about the product. Well, when I don't work for Avixa, I work essentially for a manufacturer in Montreal, Lab, and I do webinars for them, but I have a kind of a golden rule. It's 40 minutes for theory and 10 minutes for the product that you want me to highlight. Because I'm not going to talk for 1 hour to anybody about a black box. I want to teach people what happens inside a black box so that they can decide which one is the best black box. And that's, you see, when we talk here, we have so many qualities, we have so many options, we have so many ways of deploying networks that you need to continue to educate people. And you see it in the even on the AV community that talk about AV over IP, they don't really understand most of the time what they're doing because all they're getting is the information from manufacturers. If I go to a manufacturer's site and they don't have an academy and they don't have a serious training in there, I just run out of that site very, very quickly.
Get me out of here.
Yeah.
You know, Jose, you said something there that I think is important. I think we all need to get shirts that say AV industry, we really don't know what we're talking about, because I think
exactly.
That's a lot of us are all industry. We all know this much of the entire industry and we focus on that, but we talk about all of this stuff. And that's part of the challenge is expanding our own knowledge base. And so I do want to thank you for this. This has been a fantastic conversation. We're going to have you back to get more information on this stuff. I hope this has been helpful for you to get some kind of end user boots on the ground perspective of people who are dealing with this stuff day in and day out and some of our challenges and our frustrations. So bother the heck out of us. You can always call Justin in the middle of the night and ask him questions too, because he just turns around and asks us. This has been great. Any last things you want to bring up or things that you want to ask, or any last things we didn't get to?
Well, I mean, no, it's been great, but I would like to leave with some controversy.
Ooh, I like it.
I don't know why we call it AV over IP, because all we do is essentially on the LAN. So I actually was trying to do AV over the network, but that's Avon, and there was a cosmetics company that didn't like that very much. But I've seen a lot of people writing about NAP, networked AV, networked AV, networked AV. I think AV over IP really it's a misnomer.
Yeah. If only Extron wouldn't have
it is.
copyrighted that damn name.
Oh, that's right. They did do that, didn't they?
Yeah. I think Crestron even got a version of that too.
I like
because AV over IP.
I love the information
Netflix,
you had about your class. That's AV for IT folks. How would somebody, if they're listening to this and they want to force their network guys to call you, how do they find that class?
It's on the Avixa website. They're already promoting it. And the first class is going to be August, I think it's 13, 14, and 15. I'm teaching it online.
I bet that class is going to become more popular as more AV people hire more network savvy people and then try to get them trained in the AV industry and all those jumbo frames we're dealing with all the time.
Yeah, I always get some IT people in my networking technology classes for some reason. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
And they're like bored and they're like, what am I doing here? Like I've had that happen when I taught too, and they're just like, why am I here? I'm like, I don't know either. I'm like, you know all this stuff. I don't know why you're listening to me talk about networks.
My biggest surprise was once I get a Cisco VP in there, and I asked the guy, what are you doing here? It turns
why don't you come up here and help me teach, dude?
Turns out he was the guy that wrote the first networking technology 20 years ago, and he wanted to see where the course had evolved.
Wow, okay.
You know, so it was interesting. Yeah.
Did his last name end in Zeely?
No. It wasn't Paul Seeley.
Okay.
That's later on.
No. Paul would never sit at a class that I teach. Come on, you know. Like, he's up in the cloud.
He's in some cloud somewhere, yeah.
Awesome.
No, great, guys. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to join you today, and I hope that I will be able to do so in the future.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have a follow-up show on this, right, at some point? So, yeah, we're going to have you back.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Jose. Well, thanks for sticking around here. And
okay, I'll drop off and I'll wait until you tell me that the recording is ready.
Are you looking to really improve your AV integration skills? On your next project, why not try independent amalgamated challenge cables? That's right, challenge cables. Why buy a standard cable and an adapter to put on 1, 2, or all 3 ends when you can use challenge cables? We've taken the most common connections you use on nearly every AV project and combined them into a single cable. HDMI to RJ45, XLR to IEC, and our super popular 5-pin captive screw Phoenix to composite video. Unlike our competitors, independent amalgamated challenge cables don't perform any of the conversions between protocols, so your signal stays just as it was when connected at the source. If you can integrate 6 of these cables in a single project and not get so angry you break something, we'll double your warranty. Independent amalgamated challenge cables. Good luck with that. So for our final segment here, we just want to read some feedback that we got from a listener. And I think we decided
we have at least one listener. It's good.
This one. We like this because it was an interesting take and it really kind of got at what we unintentionally were trying to do, I think. Let's see, where is my thing here? Okay.
The notes.
So the notes. It's in the notes. I got to scroll. All right. So this comes from Sean Robinson, who's I believe a product manager at Zilliqa. And we were doing a different event, and I said, he made a comment about my microphone and setup, and I said, we have a podcast, and that started the whole thing, sent him the link. He said, I just started AV SuperFriends on season 4, episode 11. So right in the middle of the big tier conversation, which is probably the worst place to start.
That's a rough entry point.
That's hard.
He said he just started
bold.
that. He said, from a manufacturing product guy perspective, this is by far the most helpful AV podcast I've heard as we seek to understand the real problems you guys face every day. But from just an entertainment standpoint, the banter and tongue-in-cheek commentary is right up my alley. You guys are cracking me up. So I wrote back and said, thanks for the positive feedback. We try to keep things light. And he said he just listened to it. And his response to that was, I just listened to another episode and I'm trying to keep everyone's room system tiers straight. And somehow I got confused when I got to level 4.b version 2.
Oh, so don't worry, that's Mark's.
That's Mark.
Yeah,
mine's simple. Mine's the easiest.
Thanks to Sean for writing in about that. Yes, I think that's an excellent way to put it, that we're giving honest feedback. Here's real world information, and yet also we're having fun doing it. So
uncensored.
Thanks, Sean. Go tell 3 friends.
Yeah,
and
then our listener
for all of us. Here we are,
5 after he tells 3 friends.
There you go. That's how it works.
So, Justin, you brought up the idea, and I think we will implement it. He said we needed like a little testimonials page we can put on the website. So
we do
put interesting, because we do get interesting comments from people.
And if you have really bad things to say about us, like we're ugly, like send us that and we'll put it on our website too.
Ooh, on the page you can't get to, but
I'm going to type that
the
up
stereotypical thing.
Yeah, that's just Jamie emailing you, Justin.
I
Jamie's
think
my personal troll.
Most people would say, hey, if you like or dislike whatever, go ahead and subscribe to whatever it is and follow us and leave a comment, because it does actually help. It does help the whole algorithms and how that all works. But leave us comments wherever you want. Email, put them however we get to. We will read them on there, and let's try to find a bad one. We'll bring you guys a bad one next time.
Yeah.
Maybe see if we can know
somebody lights us on fire.
If for some reason you're listening to this but can't stand it, I'm not sure why you are, but let us know.
That's known as a hate listen in the industry. Yes. So if we're your hate listen,
we'll publish those too.
Let us know that.
Please let us know. Use all the 4-letter words you can.
Yeah, yeah, definitely subscribe, because right now we are the 164th technology podcast in Canada. I really want to break the 160 mark.
Yes, we're trying. In Canada, yeah.
In
Only
Canada.
in Canada.
Mm-hmm. That's where it's all going on up there.
Is it though?
It is. So I'm told.
Yeah.
You're probably being told that by a Canadian. So
that's Raul. So
the Canadian working outside. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.